Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Good morning, everyone. Those here live with us here in Cary, North Carolina, as well as anyone who is joining us from online. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know if you are listening. Feel free to ask questions. And the streaming is thanks to Nissan Communications, who makes this possible every single week. Today's class is going to be on the Book of Ruth. Many have the tradition of reading the entire book of Ruth. Not a long book, 4 chapters. 4 chapters on Shavuot, which we just completed yesterday, the holiday of Shavuot. And it's a book that we haven't done too often at the Lunch and Learns over here. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to explore it today. It's interesting that in Chabad tradition, it's not publicly read. We don't read the book of Ruth out loud, but we study it the night of Shavuot. So we read the whole thing, all 4 chapters. Just around the room, anyone know why the book of Ruth is studied on Shavuos?
Cheated. I went to your brother's class.
Okay. Why? Well, I mean, it's just random. First of all, where's the book of Ruth? Just like in the whole Tanakh, right? We have the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, then we have all the prophets, and then we have the writings, Ketuvim, all right, the writings. And in the writings, we have Psalms, we have all the Megillas, we have Job, we have other extra books that are part of the Tanakh, but are not part of the prophets. So the book of Ruth is one of those books, okay?
Debbie's saying first convert.
Oh, so Ruth was the, I don't know, first, but the quintessential convert. Let's use that word. Quintessential, because many of the laws of conversion and the theme of conversion is learned from her. And in a sense, when we got the Torah, guess what? We all converted to Judaism. We don't think about that. But when did we become Jewish? You wanted to ask me something? When did we become Jewish?
I thought it was Mount Sinai.
Oh, Mount Sinai, giving of the Torah.
I give you a little hug, just a little hug.
So even though beforehand we were a family,
Gorgeous.
we were a family stemming from common ancestors, and we had some sense of family traditions, we weren't a people that had a constitution. When did we become Jewish? Abraham and Sarah were Jewish and passed on to their kids, but it wasn't something that was black and white. I've explained before that prior to the giving of the Torah, there's no conversion. You married into the family, guess what? You joined the family. People ask, was Moses' wife Jewish? Was Abraham? Was Rebecca? It wasn't that type. You joined the family, you were Jewish. When did it become there were Jews and non-Jews and conversion? All that started at Ruth. So what Debbie pointed out, and Ann, this is going to be a little review from Shavuot night.
Okay.
She was the only one here. And you can make it a little cooler in here, Pam. Thank you. The AC is there. So the first answer given is, Ruth was a convert. On Shavuot, we all became converts. And we have to, just like someone who chooses Judaism, actively chooses to be a Jew, so too those that were born Jewish also have to choose the life of Torah.
So I have a question there.
Yeah.
Ruth was, where is that in the timeline?
Good question.
It's a long time after Sinai.
It's a long time after Sinai, correct. So that's why she was not the first convert.
Okay.
That's why she was the quintessential in terms of what she represented. Now, it's interesting you mentioned the timeline. It is pretty early on in the Jewish story, the book of Ruth. Meaning, again, there's the 5 books of Moses, there's the prophets, and there's the writings. Most of the books of writings are like later on, the Ruth or Daniel or Chronicles. That's like much later. the book, did I say Ruth?
Mhm.
I meant Esther,
Okay.
Daniel, Job. Ruth happened relatively early in Jewish history. The book of Ruth happened a few centuries after the Jews entered the land of Israel.
All right.
And
Rabbi,
that's actually how the book begins. The book begins, it was in the days of the Shoftim. Who are the Shoftim? The judges. It was a time between Joshua and the first Jewish king. The first Jewish king was King Saul. That period of time is a pretty rough time, actually, in Jewish history. In the days of Joshua, the Jews were still following God pretty good. But then after Joshua passed away, it was like the end of an era. Joshua was a continuation of Moses, just in the land of Israel.
Rabbi,
Once after Joshua passed away, the Jews all were very, very tribal. They didn't have a strong unity amongst them. There were ups and downs. They served idols. Not a good time in history.
Rabbi.
Yes.
The people online saying, are we talking about Shavuot or Gematria?
So yes, my apology. This week is not about Gematria. It is about the book of Ruth. We will have the Gematria class, God willing, soon. We're not going to forget that class. It is not this week. My apologies for the change.
Don't worry, I'll teach you something.
Or Hal will teach us about Gematria. In any event. So that is the first reason. So Ruth happened in the days of the judges. We'll talk about it in a moment. The first answer given is she was a convert. So too, we all become converts. Why else is the book of Ruth read on Shavuos?
Because she accepted the Torah.
So we met. Yeah, she accepted the Torah on Shavuot. We all accept the Torah. We are going to read that Ruth was the great great grandma of
King David.
King David, who passed away, whose yahrzeit is Shavuot. Okay. Now, that's an interesting reason, but again, that doesn't seem enough. You know, because someone's great grandmother there's a book about her. Why would that be enough of a reason? There's another side reason, and that is that the whole book discusses a lot. Harvest, wheat, barley, harvest, and Shavuot is the holiday of harvest in the land of Israel. So there's some side reasons. What I want to do today is go through the story in brief and mention 3 pivotal points in the story. And when we see those pivotal points, we will understand much clearer why we read the book of Shavuot, the book of Ruth on Shavuot. Okay, let us begin. Who here is familiar with the storyline in Ruth? Or has it been a while? A little refresher?
I was, but
Okay.
Different tech.
So if you open any Chumash, by the way, like this one, 5 books of Moses, so it says over here, the Torah, the Haftarah, and the 5 Megillas.
Ruth is one of them.
Yeah, usually we think of Megillah as the book of Esther, but there's 4 other Megillas. Ruth is one.
And what does Megillah mean?
It just means scroll. It means scroll. Megillah means scroll. So there are 5 other scrolls that are part of Ketuvim, part of the writings.
Just a minute. Megillah means-
Why are they not part of the prophets?
And the other 3?
There's the Book of Lamentations, which is written about the destruction, written by Jeremiah, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. There is Kohelet, which is in English,
Ecclesia.
Thank you. There is,
Oi.
I've gotten a freeze over here.
Yeah.
I've gotten a freeze over here. We have Kohelet, we have Esther, we have Lamentations. What am I missing? Song of Songs.
Oh.
Song of Songs written by King Solomon, and that is a metaphor for the love between God and us. Husband and wife is the way it's mentioned there. So some people read Ruth on Shavuot and Kohelet on Sukkot. But the main one, when you say the word Megillah, what everyone thinks you mean, Anne, is Esther. Okay.
And that's just because we hear more about it.
Correct. Now, why are the Megillahs in the writings and not in the prophets? Okay, what's the distinction between the two? Right, there's the 5 books of Moses. We see why they're in a category of their own. What is the distinction between the prophets and the writings? See my question? You have Nevi'im and Ketuvim. What is the distinction? It's not chronologic.
No.
Because you have the book of Ruth happens earlier in history. You see my question? Pam, you understand?
Yeah.
Torah, Nevi'im,
Is
Ketuvim.
it the case, I don't remember the book well enough, but is it the case that the Megillah are more history, this happened, whereas the prophets are more a connection to God being passed on? You know, in essence,
Yes,
prophetizing?
yes. However, the early books of the prophets are history. Joshua's history, Judges is history, Samuel's history, Kings are history. After you get past Kings, then it's all prophecies. Jeremiah, Ezekiel. So there still has to be a distinction between writings and prophets as far as
Was
the
it
first.
questionable whether it should be codified? I know that
Canonized, part of Tanakh.
That's
So I won't say questionable, but I will say is that the level of prophecy involved is of a lower degree than the prophets. Okay, in the prophets, even the ones that were written about history were written with prophecy in the sense of all. But this is also Ruach HaKodesh. There's different levels in the Ruach HaKodesh.
okay.
For instance, in the prophets, there's an expression, Ko Amar Hashem, thus the Lord says. You have a direct communication between Hashem and mankind. If you look in the book of Esther, is there any communication between God and Mordechai, what should happen to the Jewish people? No.
Why did he
So in the book itself, there is not that overt revelation from God. The authors of the Megillas wrote with Ruach HaKodesh, which means divine inspiration, but the divine inspiration is of a lower degree than a prophecy, which is God communicating with mankind directly. So there is a degree of holiness from the 5 books of Moses to the prophets to the writings, which is why if you ever have a bunch of books and you want to stack them, the Chumash goes on top.
Over the Torah?
Well, Chumash and Torah is the same,
Okay,
right?
one just has commentary.
Right. Torah. Well, Torah sometimes is used for a term used for everything.
Yeah.
But when you mean Torah,
What's the
Or the
order? So,
Tanakh.
Chumash would be first.
um,
Prophets would be even before Tehillim. Why? Because Tehillim, Psalms, is part of writings.
so if you have the other one, the one that we pray with, where's
Siddur.
Siddur.
Siddur would also go underneath the Torah.
Yeah, but what Tehillim go above Siddur or Torah, Tehillim, and then Siddur?
Ooh, and now you're getting
Because I have those 2 books. I don't
exactly,
Right,
exactly.
in the Torah, but it just doesn't.
I would say
have
Tehillim though would probably be on top of a
Siddur.
Siddur, but many Siddur has in it Tehillim.
Well,
Okay,
some.
let's go with the story. The story is a fascinating story. It begins. Instead of doing the story, let's do the story as we go along. We just celebrate Shavuot, and if I ask anyone here what happened on Shavuot, everyone will say we got the Torah. However, you can't really say it was all new information, Shavuot. We've had classes before that have alluded to the fact that the Torah isn't just laws, but it's spiritual truths, right? And spiritual truths didn't begin at Sinai. Who else knew about these spiritual truths? Were aware of these spiritual truths?
the Patriot.
Right, Adam, Noah, the matriarchs, the patriarchs, right? In the way the Talmud puts it, and why don't you begin? The Talmud writes, our first text today.
Since the days of the patriarchs, Torah study has not departed from our ancestors. In Egypt, they had Torah academies as evidences of the fact that God commanded Moshe, "Go and assemble the Torah scholars of Israel." Abraham too was a scholar and headed a yeshiva.
So the yeshiva was different than a yeshiva today. They taught spiritual truths. These ideas were not new. Now, the Torah in its physical form, with all of its laws, not all of that was given, but with Ruach HaKodesh, with prophecy, they had an intuition about what laws were going to come. And it's not only the Talmud that says this. Look at this verse from Genesis. God is saying, Abraham is my man. I love Abraham. Why do I love Abraham?
Because Abraham hearkened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my instructions.
Okay, look at that pasuk, especially in the Hebrew. Abraham kept the last 3 words, mitzvotai, chukotai, v'toratai. Abraham kept my mitzvahs, my laws, and my Torah. And in fact, it actually makes Torah plural. You know why?
Yeah, that's right.
Written Torah and oral Torah. So not only did Abraham, so this is how ahead of his times he was. We have another paper here. This is how ahead of the times he was. Not only was he aware of a concept of Torah, but even some later day ideas he knew through prophecy. So if that is the case, and the Jews, even while they were in Egypt, had this notion of spiritual truths, what changed at Sinai? Right? What changed? So there are many different answers. This class is going to highlight something different than what we've discussed in the past. You hear my question? What changed at Sinai? What happened at Sinai that was different to the spiritual truths the Torah had, the spiritual truths the Jews had before that point? What do you think?
Accepted it.
So they accepted, and what happens after they accepted it?
Then they become Jews.
Okay, so okay. What else?
A marriage, where the
Shekinah.
two stones were the ketubah between Moses and the people, and the world changed for a moment from material to spiritual before it went back.
So you mentioned two different ideas, Hal. One is that the world was transformed. And I'm going to put that idea on hold for today because that's not the subject of today's class, but that is absolutely correct. The Torah affected the physical world. I want to talk about marriage. The Jews became married to God. Up until then, they had a relationship, but it was more like what? Like dating. It was more like dating. When did they say, I do?
At Sinai.
At Sinai. And what happens when someone says, I do?
They're done.
You gotta
You're done. There we go.
You're committed.
You know what they say, the difference between someone who is,
Oh, yeah, I have a sweater on here, but.
Yeah, I can put it
you know, they say that until you get married, right? You're not complete. But then afterwards, you're finished. It's a joke.
Rabbi.
All right.
Rabbi,
So, yes.
Debbie is saying God spoke to them directly. It was not just prophecy. It wasn't through Moses and Aaron
Good.
or in a dream.
Correct. It was real to every single Jew. And that goes together with the point that we said, every Jew said, I do. And in other words, the Jews at Sinai became obligated in the Torah mitzvah. Okay? And that's a funny thing. Why is it a funny thing? We celebrate Shavuot, not that this was when we first heard the news. You know, that I understand. We celebrate. This is when we heard about these beautiful spiritual truths. Let's celebrate it. No. We celebrate the fact that we became obligated in the Torah mitzvah. Now, why would you celebrate that? Right? Meaning, in the Western world today, I'm going to put it this way. Which idea, which value is probably most important in the Western world today? Freedom. Value, not item. Freedom. The ability to choose. As opposed to in the ancient world where things were forced upon you, today you can choose. And a couple hundred years ago, that meant, freedom of press and freedom of religion. Today, again, wherever you are in terms of your beliefs, we all acknowledge that we live in a world today where you can really choose anything, right?
Here.
Here.
In America.
Oh, not in the whole world, but in our world, everything is up to your choice, whether it's career, whether it's marriage, whether now we're dealing with a gender identity thing. The choice is very important, so much so that let's take an issue, and I'm not here to discuss the issue, but let's talk about abortion. Those that are for abortion will point to those that are against it and call them what? Anti-choice. Because that word resonates strongly in America. You're anti-choice. Choice is that's the free world. My goal here is not to talk about that issue, but just to say how strongly the word choice resonates with us over here. And thank God, as the Jewish people, we have benefited greatly from living in a society like that where things are not imposed on us, right? So we recognize the value of choice. So what happens at Matan Torah is God says, you know what? Up until now, you could choose to do these things if you want. Now, this is obligated on you. What do we celebrate that? It's a funny thing. We celebrate the fact that the mitzvot became obligated. Now, we still chose to enter that relationship. As you remember, the Jews said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do. Right. But the notion that someone is born Jewish, and therefore they have a certain relationship with God that is supposed to be done through mitzvot. That began at Sinai, with the exception of a convert today who chooses that path later on. But for someone else, by virtue of the fact that they are born Jewish, these are their mitzvot. That runs contrary to the notion of choosing, right? Okay. So it's a funny thing. So let's think in life, where else do we celebrate losing a sense of freedom? So marriage would be one, right?
Having children.
Having children would be. So it's a very interesting question. When in life do we voluntarily get rid of freedom? Now, you might tell me we have to define what freedom means, but when do we voluntarily forego superficial freedoms?
When we benefit from
In a deep way. Such as, so let's talk about having children. Your life is different. You can no longer do the same things as you used to be able to do once you have children, but people happily do it. Why?
The benefits outweigh the
But it's
obligations.
But the benefits is of a different type. It's not a benefit of time. It's a benefit of
It's
Giving,
because once you get into
love,
marriage, you're giving.
calling, however, the same thing would be true of a marriage, There are other examples as well, certain careers, I think to an extreme. Think about someone who wants to become president, man or a woman who wants to become president of America. They know that their
They're
life,
mentally ill, so they.
Right. Well, that's
But-
what
but
we
they give up
have
a
to
great
do
amount.
now.
I don't appreciate enough what they are giving up.
One of the things they completely give up is privacy,
Yes.
Yeah.
or pretty close to it.
And no more iPhone, right? That's
Well, unless you break the law.
okay. But you know what? Wherever they go, they have someone next to them. They can't. But they do it hopefully because they feel
So
because they
they're
feel
making
like
a meaningful contribution.
correct. So it's an interesting notion that people sometimes forego freedoms for the sake of something greater. And what we're going to do now is show how this idea of the Jews at Sinai saying, yeah, maybe we have more restrictions, maybe we have more commandments, but that's for a greater, deeper meaning. That ties in very deeply with the story of Ruth. So let us now begin with some texts. We will start with the very first text of Ruth. Let's begin.
Ruth 1:1.
1:1. Ruth 1:1.
Okay. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges judged that there was a famine in the land, and a man went from Bethlehem of Judah to sojourn in the fields of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the man's name was Elimelech, or sort of, and his wife's name was Naomi.
That's a little easier, Naomi. We can do that. And you can see which name stuck. Out of all these names, Naomi is the one that stuck. Keep on reading.
And his 2 sons' names were Mahlon and Chilion, distinguished people from Bethlehem of Judah, and they came to the fields of Moab.
And this is a typo at this point. And they remained there. So we have this distinguished family of Elimelech and Naomi. We are told that they are very rich, they're very wealthy, and they leave Israel to go to the land of Moab. I don't remember where on the map Moab is. Maybe someone can help me. Someone online? Where's Moab? Can anyone help me geographically where that is?
Moab, if I'm not mistaken, is in northern, what we call today the West Bank, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so above,
like northern Israel, toward the Sea of Galilee.
but it would have to be above the biblical land of Israel because they're leaving Israel and they're entering a foreign land. The Jews have already conquered Israel. So I don't know if it's Lebanon. I'm not sure where Moab is. Someone can search. But this is a big deal. Why are they leaving? The Jews just arrived in Israel. They're getting together. They're leaving. Why are they leaving?
Famine already in the land of plenty.
All right. And the famine was there because the Jews weren't listening. But that is all if you read the book of Judges. See, what's interesting about their book of Ruth is it's in the book of Judges, we don't know about this story. It's like a standalone story that we only read about in the writings. We know it happened in the days when the judges judged. The judges, I told you, was a period of time between Joshua and the first king. There are many famous judges. Samson, who we'll read about in this week's Haftarah, Deborah, Devorah, amongst others. So the Midrash writes, why in the world did Elimelech and Naomi leave town?
Elimelech was one of the great people of the land and of the leaders of the generation. When famine struck, he said to himself, all of Israel will now camp at my doorway, each person with his or her basket begging for alms. So he stood up and fled.
Ooh, so why did he leave?
He didn't want to be feeding the people, and that's why he died.
Okay, so yeah, in biblical times he got punished for it. But let's talk about his decision before we talk about what happened to him. He was wealthy. The Medrash says he clearly had enough money to feed a good, to really help out the people in, where's it, Bethlehem?
Yes.
Where do we say this was?
Yeah.
Bethlehem.
Two.
So he leaves town. Why?
He doesn't want to lose his money.
Selfish.
He was I-central.
Ego.
What if he felt that he
His
couldn't
ego,
help
huh?
everybody? What if he was afraid that if he helped some people and then all the people and then he would no longer be able to help everyone and he would be destitute himself? Not because he was so selfish, not because he was so, I want to part with my money, but maybe he was afraid. He didn't trust Hashem. He didn't trust God, that God would provide for them because it was already happening a famine. So
Right.
right there, God was not providing.
Okay.
So maybe he was afraid that he would be then responsible for everyone.
So there's still that maybe I think we can try to read it in a little better light, but at the end of the day, it's someone who's first and foremost
Reaction.
concerned with
His family.
themselves and family, and like not wanting to bother with someone else. So that is what we can see from this medrash. Other people are blessed with a different philosophy of life, and a philosophy of life of if Hashem blessed me with assets or gifts or talents, it is there for this reason. Why else do I have it? He missed that. So I put a question over here. Was he wrong? Would he say he's evil for doing this? Evil? No.
No,
He
just
just
wrong. Just wrong.
wrong.
You could say he was human.
He missed a higher calling.
Right. Leader of a generation.
He was, and
He
certainly,
should have cared for the people.
We can imagine what kind of leader he was.
Right.
So again, it's easy to dismiss him as evil or bad. We can understand how someone didn't want to be bothered with that. It could have been that his responsibilities would have been great. His wealth would have been diminished. He would have a hard time saying no to anyone. So he does it. Okay.
Rabbi,
I just asked
Yes.
a question.
two more short comments from Debbie. She said that Moab is the historical name for a mountainous strip of land in Jordan. The land lies alongside much of the eastern shore of the Dead Sea. So I was wrong. It's
Interesting. So thank you, Debbie. And if you remember that even when the Jews were in Israel, there was Israel proper. Then there was what we call the territories, but that was not West Bank. That was actually East Bank. There were 2.5 tribes that were on the East Bank. That was land that they conquered in Moses' time. So this was even east of those people. Thank you, Debbie.
And
that is why often in the Tanakh, Moab is fighting the most with those 2.5 tribes that are on the East Bank. When the situation really got bad, Moab even had enough guts to fight the Jewish people in the land of Israel proper. That's correct. Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, and the other thing she said is you were going to answer what is superficial freedom?
We're getting there.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we are absolutely getting there. We're going to do this by means of these questions. So the first story is the story of Elimelech leaving. So he goes down to Moab, and as you said, in biblical times, things happen fast. God punishes him. He dies. His two sons, whose name were Machlon and Chilyon, they marry locals in Moab. Not only locals, but Moabites who had very high status. They were the grandchildren of the Moabite king of the time, Orpah and Ruth. So they marry them, and then disaster strikes again. About a decade later, he was there for a while. They lose their money because he dies, and these were the days where, if you didn't have a supporter, women didn't have much rights then. It was hard to earn a living. So then there were these two son-in-laws, two sons at least, and then they both die. So you're left with just Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth. And at that point in the story, this is still chapter 1. Naomi turns to them and says, I have no life here. I came here. This was a bad mistake from the beginning. I left Israel, a rich woman with a big family. I have no life here. I might as well go back. And the rest of my life, I'll just be a widow and a poor one collecting tzedakah. But you guys have a life ahead of you. There's absolutely no reason for you to come back with me. Why don't I read the next text, 1:8.
As Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each woman to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the deceased and with me. May the Lord grant you that you find rest, each woman in her husband's house." And she kissed them. And they raised their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, but we will return with you to your people."
So we want to come with you to your people, the land of Israel. And keep in mind, they wouldn't have been welcome so friendly in Israel. There's some tensions between Moab and the Jewish people. Just imagine, girls without a job from Moab. It would have been a tough life going back. So Naomi says, you have a much better here where you'll have many prospective, suitors. Stay here. Keep on reading.
And Naomi said, "Return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they should be your husbands? Return, my daughters, go, for I have become too old to marry, that I should say that I have hope. Even if I had a husband tonight, and even if I had borne sons, would you wait for them until they grew up? Would you shut yourselves off for them and not marry?"
And the meaning of that is, remember, there was this marriage, there was yibum, where if a guy died childless, one of the younger brothers would traditionally marry the widow. So,
"No, my daughters, for it is much more bitter for me than for you, for the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me."
you don't want to be in my boat. It's been bad luck for me. I would recommend going elsewhere.
And they raised their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth cleaved to her. And she said, "Lo, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her God. Return after your sister-in-law." And Ruth said, "Do not entreat me to leave you, to return from following you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. So may the Lord do to me, and so may he continue, if anything but death separate me and you." And she saw that she was determined to go with her, so she stopped speaking to her.
One of the most magnificent set of verses in the Tanakh. I mean, this is powerful. What?
What made Ruth love Naomi so much? I mean,
Well, that's our question over here. This is a daughter-in-law. It reminds me of the story. There's these 2 women that come before a rabbi, and they come dragging this young man, this young lawyer. And each of them say, "He agreed to marry my daughter. No, he agreed to marry my daughter." Each one is claiming that this is my son-in-law, right? So the rabbi says, what we'll do? We'll take a sword. We'll cut them in half, and half will go to you, and half will go to you, right? And then afterwards, the woman says, no, don't do that. Let her have him. So the other one says, no, you should, do it. Says, you're the one who's the mother-in-law. It's like, what? It's the opposite from the Solomon story. Only a mother-in-law would say, cut him in half. Okay, joke on the biblical story. So your question was, what would inspire Ruth to do that when she had everything to lose, nothing to gain?
No, but more than that, she must have had such deep love for Naomi, which typically mother and daughter-in-laws sometimes don't have. What kind of a relationship was there that she was willing to go with her to the depths of?
Well, I mean, one part of it is obviously there was great love between her and Naomi, but it has to be more than just that. If you look at the verses over here, your people are my people. Your God is my God. So she clearly feels that she identifies with the Jewish people to the point of willing to sacrifice. I mean, that's the question. What really motivated Ruth to accompany Naomi? That's our question. And
Was she one of the first converts?
She's seen as the quintessential convert. There were others before her, but these lines become the basis for the ideal convert. You know, the sense of mission and destiny and calling. So I don't want to say first necessarily.
There were thousands upon thousands of converts before this.
Right. I don't want to say first, but this is still seen in a very special way. Her sense of calling. So, you know, what motivated Ruth? It has to be that. Was Orpah's decision right, wrong, or neutral? We cannot blame Orpah in the slightest.
But
from
her name
not
implies condemnation.
You're saying it means like back?
Yeah. She turned her back.
Oh, okay. But I mean, again, I can very well understand Orpah. I'm going to point three decision points in this story of the person who accepted the higher calling and those that did not. I don't want to compare Orpah to Elimelech over here. I can understand very well why Orpah went back.
And she did not have an obligation.
Not at all. Exactly.
And she was being given very good advice.
Yeah.
She went back to
yeah, exactly.
She went back to what she knew.
Exactly. So
also being a woman, like you said,
in those days,
it was
hard. Yeah.
Almost like a death sentence.
Absolutely.
You'd be like crazy if you go with
correct. So in the case of Elimelech, there it was rejecting the gifts that you already have and trying to escape to a much easier life. In the case of Orpah, it is not accepting upon yourself something that you don't have to do anyways, that perhaps might be more meaningful, deep, something that Ruth recognized. And she says, it's worthwhile to commit to that if it's going to lead me. That's really exhibit 2. And the end of the story, and we just have 6 minutes today, so we can't do it all inside, is that when she does go back, I mentioned that the tradition was that people would marry a brother-in-law. Well, in the Bible, it just mentions a brother that passes away, that doesn't have any children, the younger brother would marry them. But in biblical times, it actually sometimes went beyond the brother, and the nearest relative would marry them. And a good part of the book of Ruth discusses what happens when they do go back. And she's collecting tzedakah. In those days, there were many agricultural laws that if you had a field, you had to leave the corners for the poor. If you forgot a bundle of wheat, you had to leave them for the poor. So Naomi and Ruth go back, have no income of their own. They even have a little field, but the field's already been sold off to debtors for their debt. And she asks Ruth to go collect tzedakah. And she does in a very dignified, respectable way, and she makes a strong impression on someone by the name of Boaz. And she, in a very mysterious way, proposes to him, a little inverse from the way it normally is in the Torah. And she asks Boaz to marry her because Boaz is a cousin. Remember, I mentioned that you would ask a relative to step up to the plate. And Boaz then Boaz says over here, and we're skipping a great deal of the story, but I want to just go to that point in the story. Ruth 3:5. It's on the next page.
Boaz said, on the day that
it'd go a few verses earlier. Boaz responded, may you be blessed. Start from the middle of that earlier one.
May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. I will do for you all that you ask, for I know you are a woman of noble character. However, although I am a redeemer, but there is a kinsman closer than I.
Although I could be your redeemer, it's an expression. There is another relative closer than I. Yeah.
Boaz said, on the day that...
then stay over tonight.
Stay over tonight, and it will come to pass in the morning that if he redeem you, we will let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, I will redeem you as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning.
So he says if the other person steps up to the plate, it's a uncle actually. So the uncle is asked whether he would like to marry Ruth. And it's an odd kind of marriage kind of situation, hard for us to relate to, but what is the answer he gives? The Torah identifies this uncle without even saying his name. He is called Ploni in the Torah. Ploni in the Torah is another way of saying John Doe, or that's what Ploni means. He's called Ploni, anonymous. Mm-hmm. And he says the next day, the next verse is Boaz gathers everyone together, and he says, are you ready to both buy the field from Rus, the one that they had lost, as well as marry her. And the kinsman says, I don't want to do it. I don't want to imperil my own heritage. You assume the redemption responsibility. I cannot redeem it. What did he mean by I don't want to imperil my own heritage?
Marrying a Moab woman?
Correct. He didn't want to marry a convert from Moab. Now, there are a few reasons for that. One is they were distinguished families, so I want to marry a girl who was always one of the more prestigious families amongst the Jews. And B, there's a verse in the Torah that says that someone from the tribe of Moab should not be allowed to marry into the Jewish people, because when you left Egypt, they did not give you provisions. They were mean to you on your way out, and then later they hired Bilam to curse you. That is the wording of the Torah. There's an oral tradition that goes way back that law only refers to guys, Moabites. But women were certainly allowed to marry because the reason didn't apply to them. It's not their fault that the guys didn't do what they were supposed to do. And this was an oral tradition that went all the way back. But it wasn't known by everyone. There was always, does the Torah really mean it? There was some skepticism on it. So this Plony guy says, I don't want to imperil my own heritage marrying a girl from Moab. Boaz, you do it. So what I find so powerful about this is, how ironic is it that Mr. Plony didn't want to mess up his name. And up until today, we don't even know what his name is or any of his legacy. While Boaz sensed, so what prompted Boaz to marry Ruth? He sensed royalty. He sensed an incredible woman. He sensed a holy soul. I don't care what other people are going to think. I want to marry the girl that I feel is best for me. And he buries her, and eventually they have a son named Oved, who has a son named Jesse, Yishai, who has a son named King David. So how ironic is it that the person who didn't want to mess up his name, we don't know what happened to him. And the person, Boaz, who married Ruth, ends up having King David 3 generations later, who is, again, famous up until today. So what is the common theme through all of these stories is we have examples of a Boaz or a Ruth,
And the other guy,
or not the other guy,
Elimelech.
who stepped up to assume a responsibility. That is what Torah is, right?
They both
Did
did.
they forego? So it's foregoing superficial kind of pleasure, name, prestige, and adopting something that enriches life and makes you live from a far deeper place. That is the common theme, and that is what happened on Shavuot. Shavuot is the day where we accepted the Torah and we agreed to live by a deeper code, by a moral truth, even when it's hard, even when it's not popular, even when it goes against the stream. And just to finish where I started, I said it's funny how that was the day we became commanded in it. I'll finish with this. The Talmud actually says there's something special about being commanded to do something and doing it. You would think it's greater if you're not commanded and you do it. Look at text 87, the last text 10 from the Talmud.
Rabbi Yosef, who was blind, said, I used to say, if anyone tells me that the halakha follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that a blind person is exempt from all the Torah's commandments, I will make a festive banquet for the rabbis, because that would mean that I am not obligated to do the mitzvah, yet I fulfill them anyhow.
He was blind, and there was a debate whether someone blind is obligated in all the mitzvot. Especially in those days where I doubt they had Braille and many of the other. So could you expect them? Could you hold them responsible to fulfill all the mitzvot? So Rabbi Yossi says, I do the mitzvahs anyways, and I wouldn't mind if the halacha is in accordance with the ones who say a blind person is exempt from doing it, because all the better for me who do it, and I'll throw a party. But keep on reading.
Now, however, I have heard what Rabbi Kanina says, that one who is obligated and fulfills is greater than one who fulfills, though not obligated to do so. On the contrary, therefore, if anyone tells me that the halakha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, I will make a festive banquet for the rabbis.
What's the meaning in that? Why is it greater to be obligated in something? And perhaps the reason is, if God came to us at Sinai and said, you know what, here are 10 suggestions. 10
Multiple
suggestions.
choice.
It's a good idea. You know, you know what? It's another way of saying it's not that important. It's not that important. You are not that important. But when something is absolutely needed of you, that's especially if it's God, it's another way of saying you matter and your decisions matter tremendously. It's that way in a marriage. In a marriage, everything is so sensitive because of the commitment, and that makes everything all the greater. And the same is true on Torah. So we celebrate the responsibility because responsibility is another way of saying each mitzvah makes a difference to the world. Each mitzvah makes a difference to ourselves. Each mitzvah makes a difference to God. We'll finish with that. Thank you, everyone who was tuning in online. Any last questions or comments from the online community?
Too late now for what she said. It's going to be out of context.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right.
It's okay. It's all right.
I forgot that. Yes. Well, thank you for tuning in, and special thanks again to Nissan Communications for this stream. We will be back here, God willing, next week, same time, same place.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.